Hi, folks. Welcome back. Today, we're going to be talking about Los Angeles, the city I live in. I haven't talked about my city in a video for quite a bit. As we all know, there's a lot going on in this city, unfortunately, not for the best. I've described numerous times what the situation around my Hollywood office was like, with literal homeless people pooping on my doorstep while I'm paying a premium to have one of the best-known locations in the entire world. It's very upsetting, to say the least. Now, for the uninformed, we have a mayoral race happening here in Los Angeles, and there's a lot of conversation around the state of the city, what can be done to improve it, and what some of the biggest issues are that are affecting Angelenos. What can we do to make life better here? What are some of the things afflicting Angelenos? These are questions that are coming up more and more as people discuss the direction of the city and where Los Angeles goes from here. And with that in mind, here's a short Man on the Street segment that kind of covers what it's like to be in Los Angeles in 2026.
What makes you angry about LA?
Kind of smell like shit, but it's alright.
Homeless on every corner.
LA isn't a city, it's a public toilet at this point.
I don't want to walk to my car and go, oops, I stepped in human feces.
Actually, I'm not angry about LA. There's traffic, but it's been like that forever.
There's homelessness, but it's been like that forever.
Yeah.
Poverty, period.
Potholes.
What is Mayor Bass doing to solve these problems?
Nothing.
Ain't nothing changed.
There's nothing changed.
Still smell like I haven't seen none.
I wonder sometimes.
Who were you voting for?
Bass.
Right. Nothing that Bass has done, but you're going to vote for her.
I'm not even voting.
Does it matter? It really doesn't matter. Spencer Pratt.
Spencer Pratt.
We're going to have a Pratt Daddy summer, I'll tell you that.
He actually tells us the truth. He tells you the real hard truth of what's going on.
Karen Bass.
What is Karen Bass's greatest accomplishment?
Removing the
Nothing.
Yeah, she did a great job with that.
I believe so. Do you agree?
No.
Absolutely not.
That right there gives you a very quick introduction into the hellscape that Los Angeles currently is in 2026. It also gives you a bit of an understanding of the two likely frontrunners in the mayoral election here, Karen Bass and Spencer Pratt, the two people who, according to most polls, are likely to make it past the primary. What we saw in that video is literally what Los Angeles feels like now, a public toilet. That's what it felt like owning a business on Sunset Boulevard for 4 years. It felt like my money was being shoveled directly into a toilet while a homeless person was taking a dump on top of it. That's the reality of what many business owners have experienced in this city, and it's a big reason why the mayoral race is getting so much attention, as it usually does, but this time more than usual because of the decay that we're seeing all throughout our city. Now, needless to say, there are actually three candidates worth discussing here. I mentioned two of them already, but there's a third, Nithya Raman, the so-called urban planner and activist who has served as a Los Angeles City Council member for the 4th District since 2020. She is a member of the Democrat Socialists of America. Yes, folks, she is DSA. That means she's a socialist who was not born in America, by the way. I wonder why it's always like that. Not that there's anything wrong with that. You can be born anywhere, but that's Nithya Raman for you. Apparently, she went to Harvard and MIT. Yes, apparently the standards at those schools are that low. And yes, apparently you have to go to an Ivy League school in order to learn some of the worst ideas for government in the history of humanity. Some of the same ideas that literally genocided people in the Soviet Union and communist China. Anyway, today, folks, we're going to look at some of the statements these candidates have made. Obviously, you can probably assume where I stand. I'm a Republican. And I'm also a Spencer Pratt guy. I'm a Pratt head. Just put it right in the Pratt. That's what we're doing here. Yeah, I'm a Republican. It's no surprise. And even though this is technically a nonpartisan race, pretty much everybody in Los Angeles knows where these candidates fall politically. Now, that said, we're going to talk a little bit about each candidate, although we're going to spend the majority of our time on Nithya Raman and Karen Bass because, you know, historically speaking, Karen Bass especially, that's one of the folks who have been a center of focus on this channel. Our mayor, who I believe deserves every bit of criticism she gets because she's retarded. And Nithya Raman, who is, without a doubt, in my view, one of the worst politicians in the country. I don't say that recklessly, by the way. I say that based on what I believe is a very strong factual case. Raman is so unbelievably woke that it's honestly difficult to comprehend how somebody who supposedly went to Ivy League schools is capable of conjuring up a thought of that caliber. That said, she not only seems to oppose virtually every common sense policy position in existence, she is also one of the least likable politicians you will ever have the displeasure of encountering. She comes across as feckless, spineless, and not particularly interested in standing up for ordinary Californians. Instead, she plays a two-sided political game where she says one thing on camera while advancing policies that don't appear to align with objective reality that we are experiencing in the city. And by the way, the reason why I keep bringing up Harvard and MIT isn't because I care where somebody goes to school, is because if she truly possesses the intelligence and analytical ability that those institutions are supposed to represent, then she should be capable of recognizing that these policies simply do not work, that many people in Los Angeles simply do not want them, and that the city has continued to get worse while these sorts of socialist leaders pursuing these ideas keep seeking them out to expand their power. To be fair, that's ultimately my concern with Nithya Raman. I don't believe her vision would improve life in Los Angeles. I think that objectively, considering her time in office, it would only make things worse.
The 2023 police contract, which I voted against, ended up giving more money to the union than the city really even had. That had knock-on effects for our budget. And then last year, we ended up having a $1 billion budget deficit here in the city of Los Angeles. Billion with a B. Enormous budget deficit. And the city had to cut essential services in response to that. So we cut everything from staffing for fixing streetlights to people fixing potholes and money for all of these things that are also part of what makes life in LA livable, right? In response to that. And so we ended up now having something like 30,000 streetlights across the city of LA that are out. Wow. And the average repair time for a broken streetlight going from just a month or two to now a year.
Wow.
Because of how massively we had to cut our staffing and our ability to respond to these essential services. Our quality of our streets has gone down. Our ability to be able to build out unarmed crisis response has gone down. We aren't funding immigration defense at the rate that we used to. During the Trump administration's, horrific actions on our streets, we were not able to fund as a city support for immigrants who needed it desperately. We funded it at a lower rate than we did during the last Trump administration because of this mayor's decisions. And to me, as a local representative, that makes me really, really frustrated and angry about the way in which our dollars are being spent in the city of LA.
Oh, well, that's all really nice, Nithya, but here's a follow-up question for you. Why didn't you do anything about it when you had a chance? Haven't you been in government for 6 years? Why haven't you done anything about it? Why should we trust you with more power considering you've done absolutely nothing? Zero. Nada. In fact, by your own admission, you were part of the problem. You're part of the reason the city has gone into a $1 billion deficit. Our streets have more potholes since you got into office. Our streetlights are out since you got into office. So why should we elect you as mayor? Why? You didn't make a case for that. You know why, folks? Because she doesn't have a solution. Because she's a problem creator. You know how there are problem solvers? This is what the Democrats and the DSA are. They're problem creators. That's all they do. They don't solve problems. They create more of them. And you can see this pattern all throughout the country. Statistically, every city the Democrats and the DSA control, every office they control, the problems seem to amplify for some reason because they are problem creators, not actual problem solvers. It's why they don't abide by the simple, most basic form of common sense. These people need a permanent state of crisis. It's a Leninist rule, in case any of you have forgotten. They need a continuous deterioration of destruction of the social order in order to justify the endless expansion of their own power. They want your life to remain miserable while they continue extending their time in office, constantly promising that the solution is right around the corner, folks. It's coming, I promise, my friends. But at the end of the day, it's just like the bullet train. It's a pie in the sky hope that Democrats desperately want to keep alive because in reality, it's never going to arrive.
Even with all of the resistance here, even with every single elected official and resident saying we do not want ICE here, ICE is still on our streets. They are kidnapping people across Southern California. It is still going on.
Every single one.
Even with a very robust resistance here to what the federal government wants to accomplish in America, we are still harmed. Now imagine what that happens when the mayor is inviting ICE into the city. when the mayor is saying, I will end our sanctuary city status in a city of immigrants.
Right.
Like, the idea is baffling to me. Just how can this even be a possibility for us? It feels surreal. It really does. I want to make sure our LAPD is not collaborating with ICE in any way, or even giving the appearance of collaboration with ICE. That has happened far too often, and it has undermined people's faith in local law enforcement and in our city's ability to protect them. If you're seeing that LAPD is working with federal law enforcement or appearing to work with federal law enforcement, I think that absolutely disintegrates your relationship with your city, and it's devastating for our city. They absolutely should not be doing that. So I'd want to make sure that there is absolutely no collaboration, and that LAPD is subject to audits of their actions, as well as our data sharing practices, to make sure that anything at the city is not being shared with federal law enforcement databases that could be used for immigration enforcement as well. This was part of actually the Sanctuary City Ordinance, which I co-authored and helped pass at the city. And I want to make sure that that ordinance is actually being followed in every word to ensure that residents are being protected.
This is just brilliant, folks. It really, truly is, because she makes several admissions here, some of them truly egregious when you think about it. Number one, she says that every single resident in Los Angeles doesn't want ICE in their streets. Really? Every single one, 11 million Angelinos, and every single one of them is saying, hey, I don't want ICE in my streets. You have that data, Nithya? You want to share it with us? You're really out here claiming there's a broad consensus across Los Angeles on that singular issue? Keep in mind, folks, that immigration was one of the most important issues that helped President Trump get elected back into office in 2024. So much so that it's, in fact, the singular issue that helped reduce the Democrat majority even here in Los Angeles. Trump performed better than many Republicans have for many years here, strictly on that issue. So this is one of those statements that Nithya is just throwing out on this podcast with absolutely zero pushback, despite being objectively wrong and having zero data to back her up. Now, she then talks about there being a very robust resistance to what the federal government wants to accomplish as far as immigration policy goes. There are a few things worth noting in that statement from Nithya. First, the resistance she's talking about includes activist groups that, as we've discussed previously on this channel, have received support from figures like Neville Roy Singham. We covered this just a few days ago. Hassan Piker himself admitted that organizations like the PSL and other activist groups have been involved in tracking ICE operations and following ICE agents around the country, contributing to disruptions and political agitation throughout this nation. Now, what's also interesting is that in the same breath, Nithya describes effectively what the breakdown in cooperation between the county, the state, and the federal government will look like under her rule. See, in my view, that's one of the more significant governance conflicts we're witnessing play out throughout the country right now. This is a situation where local and state officials are openly resisting federal immigration enforcement priorities from the administration, and Nithya describes that resistance is something that's positive. Obviously, federalism is something that's central to the American Republic. The states and the counties should be allowed to make decisions based on local issues and what's in the interest of the local constituency. But that said, when you're witnessing a large breakdown between federal, state, and county cooperation, you start having a problem. And this is something we've discussed many times because it's often cited as one of the factors contributing to the tensions we're seeing playing out in the streets. Sanctuary policies, right? Before California adopted statewide sanctuary policies, somebody would get arrested, local law enforcement would coordinate with ICE, and immigration determinations could largely take place within the jail and the detention system without having to play out in the street. In fact, very little of the process played out publicly in the streets at that time. So much so that one of the central arguments made by critics of sanctuary state legislation at that time when this law, SB 57, was being passed, was that reducing cooperation between local and federal authorities would push more federal immigration enforcement activity into public spaces and could increase the potential for confrontation. Supporters of the legislation largely dismissed those concerns and diminished them. Since then, however, we've seen growing tensions between activists and federal law enforcement during these enforcement actions, all of it playing out in the streets. Unfortunately, those confrontations have sometimes resulted in violence and, in some instances, even deaths. That's a tragedy. This kind of law enforcement activity should be conducted safely and securely. It shouldn't escalate into violence. It shouldn't escalate into death. That's why I view Nithya Raman's position as contributing to and encouraging the conditions that lead to these confrontations. She's basically calling for violence, folks, whether that's her intent or not. The result of her policies is continued conflict between activists and federal law enforcement play out in the public. Because here's the reality. The federal government has authority to enforce federal immigration law. That's the structure of our government. The federal government has supremacy over the county, and federal immigration law remains the law of the land. A county's sanctuary policy does not grant a city the authority to prevent the federal government from enforcing federal immigration law. Nithya also proudly notes that she helped push sanctuary policies in Los Angeles, but here's what's interesting. California had already adopted statewide sanctuary policies before Los Angeles passed its own sanctuary measures. Since California was already a sanctuary state, Los Angeles was effectively operating as a sanctuary city by virtue of state law. In practical terms, Los Angeles did not need a separate sanctuary city law in order to become a sanctuary city, as Nithya tries to paint it here and give herself credit for. That's what I think is so revealing about this entire situation and these people. Too often, these politicians seem more interested in the appearance of doing something than actually doing something in the interests of Angelenos. Los Angeles was already covered by a state sanctuary framework. The city could certainly create additional LAPD policies and procedures, but the broader sanctuary framework was already in place because the state implemented them. Which in essence means that passing another law at the county level allowed corrupt politicians like Nithya Raman to basically claim victory, even though the practical effect was minimal, if any. Which brings us to a broader question about sanctuary policies themselves. Sanctuary policies are not federal policy. They're not enshrined in the Constitution. Immigration enforcement remains a federal responsibility, and immigration policy is closely tied to questions of national sovereignty, border security, and actually even foreign policy. In many respects, immigration policy is an extension of foreign policy because it directly concerns who enters a country and under what conditions. And this is where I fundamentally disagree with retarded politicians like Nithya Raman. Nithya is not U.S. born. And while there's nothing wrong with being born somewhere else, I strongly disagree with what I view as her open border policies. I think we all know where these policies lead. In my view, they undermine American sovereignty, weaken the American Republic, and move the country further away from having a coherent immigration system that serves the interests of Americans. I also believe that if these policies continue indefinitely, they will create increasing social, political, and cultural tensions throughout the country. We are going to completely lose social cohesion in every sense of the word. The centrifugal force that these sorts of policies are pushing is truly to tear apart at the national fabric that holds this country together. Now, all of me said, Karen Bass, the other DSA candidate, so-called Democrat, who, by the way, is a member of the Vince Ramos Brigade, back in the 70s when she was traveling to Cuba often, to her own admission, in her teen years, and training and how to become a communist insurgent in America. Well, she's no better. And here's proof.
Reality is our streets are safer than they've been since, what, the 1950s?
What? How?
Yeah, and you know,
Liar.
gang homicide is down. And by the way, most of the homicides are gang-related, is down to 1960 levels.
Bullshit. You know why? You know why they keep making these claims that crime is down in Los Angeles? You know why Karen Bass keeps trying to sell this narrative? Because Democrats have spent years downgrading many felonies and high-level crimes into lower-level misdemeanors. They're running the same playbook the DSA runs. Reduce penalties, reduce the severity of crimes on paper, reduce the consequences, and then point to the statistics as proof that things are improving. They really are. There's less of crime. We even saw Mamdani try this out in New York. Now, a big part of this appearance of the numbers going down is also driven by state policy. The reality is that our jail system is overrun. We only have so much jail space, and law enforcement can only process so many people. As a result, police departments are increasingly being forced to prioritize certain crimes over others in order to keep the most dangerous offenders off the streets. That means some crimes simply aren't being pursued the same way they once were. Some aren't being prioritized. Some aren't ending up on the books in the same way they used to end up on the books. That's how you create the appearance of deflated crime statistics, even when people living in these communities can clearly see that crime remains a serious problem. In fact, as we've covered multiple times on this channel, crime is very much on the rise throughout Los Angeles and California for the last 2 to 3 years minimum, if not longer. The situation has become so ridiculous that even in West Los Angeles, people were parking their cars on the street, waking up in the next morning and finding them sitting on cinder blocks because their wheels had been stolen overnight. Just doesn't happen in first world countries. But it happened to multiple people. Home burglaries have become so common that you'll see the same house hit multiple times in a matter of weeks by the same group. Why? Because those groups often aren't being taken off the streets. Local law enforcement has to prioritize murders, homicides, and other violent crimes ahead of burglaries and property crimes because resources are just that limited. Now, needless to say, the data Karen cites here is also highly questionable. She claims crime is at its lowest level since the 1950s. Well, let me tell you this, Karen. Los Angeles County Sheriff's records show that in 1956, there were 48 homicides in all of Los Angeles County. 48. And by the way, that was actually the highest homicide total in that decade. And also, by the way, Los Angeles County had only a fraction of the population it has today. We currently have roughly 11 million people in LA County. And since Karen Bass took office, homicides haven't fallen below 184 in a single year. So when you start throwing around claims that crime is at levels we haven't seen since the 1950s, people should probably look at those numbers closer, Karen, because it's very evident that you're lying. And on that note, I do want to make a final point on this. If crime actually is dropping, then the people who deserve the credit are the police officers out there doing the work every single day, not Karen Bass. I just want to make that absolutely clear, okay? Our boys in blue are doing the job for you, okay? Stop lying, Karen.
When you talked to Jake Tapper in 2023, you said that your goal was to end street homelessness in LA by 2026. It's now 2026.
And we haven't ended it.
We have not ended it, and we're not close to ending it.
Yeah.
How are you so off?
Well, basically, when I said that, it was at the beginning of my term. I am very committed to achieving that goal. I didn't anticipate some of the bureaucratic barriers that I would experience, but I am prepared to take those on now.
No, now she's ready.
Example.
Now.
Los Angeles made a decision probably 20, 25 years ago to not address street homelessness, to focus solely on building. And granted, I have fast-tracked 42,000 units of affordable housing, but it still takes a couple of years. So basically, the policy of LA City and LA County was we could accept street homelessness as long as we were building. We didn't anticipate the problem metastasizing. In my 3.5 years, for the first time, 2 years in a row, street homelessness has decreased in our city. There hadn't been a decrease before. That is a quality of life issue that impacts all Angelenos. Whether you are unhoused or whether you run a business and your business can't function because there's tents outside, whether you're a parent that's trying to navigate through tents to get to school, or whether it's residents where it has decreased the quality of life. So this is a problem that all Angelenos experience, and we have got to have a commitment that this has to end. The city and the county never made that commitment before, and I found something that surprised me. I found a lot of people who work internal in the system who were very resistant to ending street homelessness.
This is just shameless. It absolutely is. This woman got caught red-handed here saying she was going to end homelessness by 2026, and then all of a sudden we're in 2026, and it's actually just as bad, if not actually worse. Now, obviously, she goes a second later and talks about how she's the first mayor to make homelessness go down. She says 2 years in a row we made homelessness go down. Well, here's the thing, folks. If homelessness truly did go down, and I am suspicious of the numbers that the city of Los Angeles under Karen Bass has released, because they could very well fudge the numbers. In fact, they've revised those numbers several times. They've done this before. In fact, they'll do it again because that's how they create support around their narrative. Now, if it did in fact go down, the reason why it did go down is because we currently have about 2,500 homeless people dying in the streets of Los Angeles every single year. Yeah, it's that many people, about 6 a day. And crazy enough, that matches the exact number of people that Karen Bass cites as the number of homeless people going down during her rule. It's almost a perfect match. Isn't that crazy? So that's what's happening. Homeless people in Los Angeles are dying in the streets. That's the lesson here. If the number of homeless people is actively going down in Los Angeles, it's because Karen Bass is actively genociding them.
How many people who are unhoused that you meet have no teeth at all? They don't have teeth. Why? Because meth rots your teeth. You can't succeed without teeth. So there needs to be comprehensive health care provided to people.
So let me see if I get this straight. You want to give people better teeth so they can go out into the streets and die. Wow. Makes a lot of sense. That's just Democrats trying to get you to burn more of your money so they can tax you even more for what's left. You, the taxpaying citizen, will have your teeth falling out of your face while the guy over there smoking meth on the street is going to get a face full of expensive veneers just because he's smoking meth on the streets. Sounds like a wonderful campaign proposal, don't you think, folks? And by the way, there's absolutely zero ways that this could ever turn into something corrupt, just like literally everything else Democrats do, right? This would never be one of those NGO pipelines. Get them more teeth. This guy doesn't have enough teeth on his face. I gotta put my kids through college. Take another teeth, you bum. Unbelievable, to say the least.
Councilmember Hugo Soto Martinez, who has endorsed you, he wants to explore ways to let non-citizens vote in city elections. I know that there are some cities that already do this, but politics is all about timing. With Donald Trump in the White House, is this the right time for Los Angeles to go down this path?
Well, I think we need to explore it.
They're not even beating around the bush anymore. They want illegals to vote. They literally just say it out loud. There's no quiet part. They want illegals to vote in our elections. This is unbelievable. Actually, straight up crazy. Actually insane. I don't even know how to react. I'm at a loss for words. And by the way, this was also a debate topic during the last debate between Raman, Bass, and Pratt. And Raman said she held a similar position. I mean, unbelievable. There's no way to argue with these folks. They're mindless. Zero cognitive thinking ability or even respect for the American Republic. They just want to complete the solution of the American state. Needless to say, only citizens should vote. That's how it should work in America. If you like it otherwise, go somewhere else and do it, okay? Because you clearly don't actually believe in the American Republic. You're just a bloodthirsty politician looking for more people to suck a vote out of. Now, needless to say, the situation in Los Angeles isn't good. The options that we have for mayor aren't good when it comes to Bass and Nithya Raman. So let's check in Los Angeles and see what some of these voters think about the options they have and some of the reasons around why they're going to vote the way they're going to vote. And spoiler alert, this one will black pill you. No pun intended.
Who do you want to win as mayor of LA?
Karen Bass.
And why Karen Bass?
Black Pride.
Okay, anything else?
No.
Just that or some policies or something like that you can share?
Nah.
That is legitimately insane. It really is, because imagine if a white person said what she just said. Just change the words around. If Karen Bass were a white woman, right? And somebody said she's voting for Karen Bass because of white pride and because she's white, their life would be over instantly. They'd be called a white supremacist. They'd be called an anti-Semite. They'd be called a racist. Their life would be over. Absolutely, in a split second. But for some reason, it's apparently acceptable or even considered virtuous for somebody to openly communicate that they're voting purely along racial lines. It's not even about policy. She knows zero policy. She says it herself. She's voting strictly along racial lines purely. And look, Pat Buchanan has a book I've been reading recently, Suicide of a Superpower, where he talks about America being pulled in different directions by a centrifugal force that will inevitably lead it into a greater and greater state of tribalism and ethnic conflict. And this is quite literally what we're seeing play out to a heightened effect. LA is a case study for how the global elites want to manage America. And the country will fractionalize to a greater and greater extent as this becomes normalized in politics, especially as you continue to see this drop in cooperation between the county, the state, and the federal government. Once the authority of the federal government is effectively cracked by local governments, we will see a complete fracture. That's truly the only thing keeping the country together at this point, the federal government. We've lost a lot of our social cohesion. The country is no longer homogenous. There's no longer a unified understanding of America as a great nation. People are taught in school to hate this country. There's not even a common understanding that this is foundationally a Christian nation. You're taught to hate your country. You're taught that this is a secular, a-religious place and that you should align yourself racially and ethnically instead of aligning yourself with the principles that made this country great: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And needless to say, if we continue down this route, the end is not going to be good, because right now, this lady is voting along racial lines, very much like post-apartheid South Africa, where people are quite literally chanting, "Kill the Boer," and taking white farmland. This is what she's voting for. This is the subtext for this kind of activism and motivation to vote like this. She's voting along racial lines because she's looking for ethnic and racial justice for what she sees as her ancestors being oppressed by evil white men. And this isn't going to end well, folks. There's going to be an awakening because most righteous men are not going to allow this country to fall into a further dilapidated state. Anyway, folks, you tell me what you think in the comments down below. Hope you have a terrific day. Peace.